Welcome back to another Midnight Tales. Tonight we have Vacant Apartment. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, subscribe, and like for more.
Andrea Crum wasn't in the habit of rushing. That was one of the things she liked most about her new apartment, the stillness. The building itself was old, 3 floors, with wallpaper that had long since peeled into curling strips, and a staircase that sighed under every step. But it was quiet. No traffic bleeding through thin windows, no neighbors quarreling through the walls, just quiet. Her evenings fell into rhythm quickly. Boil water, steep tea, slip into her worn slippers, and settle into the armchair with whichever library book she was nursing that week. She liked the hush of it, the sense that the world went on somewhere else, leaving her cocooned in peace. It was during one of those evenings, with her teacup balanced on the armrest, that she heard it. A scrape, faint but distinct, the sound of wood against wood, like a chair being dragged across the floor. It came from the unit directly beneath hers. Andrea frowned. She thought that floor was vacant. She tilted her head, listening. Nothing followed, just the creak of the old building settling into itself. She let it pass, took a slow sip of her tea, and returned to her book. But the sound stayed with her. The next evening unfolded the same as the last. Quiet tea, warm lamplight, and the soft rustle of pages. Andrea had almost forgotten about the strange scrape when another sound drifted upward. This time it wasn't furniture. It was softer. A faint clink, like porcelain meeting wood. Andrea froze, cup in hand. Slowly, she set her teacup down on the side table. From below came the faintest echo, a cup placed down in perfect imitation. Her pulse stumbled. She leaned forward, straining to hear more, but the apartment fell silent again. After a few minutes, she convinced herself it was coincidence. Maybe someone had moved in without her noticing. Maybe she wasn't the only one who liked a cup of tea at night. Still, when she stood later to slip off her slippers, she noticed something unsettling. They weren't where she had left them. One lay neatly by the bed, the other turned slightly, as if nudged by an unseen foot. Andrea shook her head, muttering to herself, "Careless, that's all." But she remembered setting them side by side. She always did. 2 nights later, Andrea decided to test herself. She told herself she was being foolish, that she'd simply grown hyper-aware of the creaks and groans of an old building. But still, when the kettle began to hum with warmth before she'd even filled it, a chill slipped down her spine. She touched the handle, lukewarm, almost as if it had just been used. That night, she tried something different. She set her book aside and stood. Slowly, deliberately, she crossed the room. From below, a faint shuffle of footsteps. Andrea froze mid-step, waited. Then, just as cautiously, she took another step. The sound came again, perfectly timed, like a mirror echoing her weight against the floorboards. Her throat tightened. She walked back, faster this time, forcing herself not to imagine the floor below pacing in lockstep. But the echo followed, step for step. When she stopped, it stopped. For a long moment she stood in the quiet, her ears straining. Then came the soft scrape of a chair being pulled out, the sound she had first heard, and somehow it felt like an invitation. The following morning, Andrea carried her junk mail and grocery flyer down the narrow stairwell. At the first-floor mailboxes, she found Mrs. Keene, an older tenant with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, sorting her envelopes. Andrea hesitated, then forced her voice into casualness. "Hey, do you know if someone's living in the unit under me?" Mrs. Keene looked up, startled. "Unit 2?" She gave a dry laugh. "Honey, no one's lived there in years. Been sealed off since that plumbing collapse. Landlord never bothered fixing it. Cheaper to just call it storage." Andrea blinked. "Storage?" "Vacant." Mrs. Keene's gaze lingered, suspicious. "Why?" Andrea forced a shrug, pretending to flip through her flyers. "Oh, I just thought I heard something." "Guess it's just the pipes," Mrs. Keene sniffed, tucking her mail under her arm. "These old buildings talk at night. Get used to it." She gave Andrea a thin smile before heading up the stairs. Andrea lingered a moment longer, staring at the slot for Unit 2. It was empty, dust lining the inside like no letter had touched it in years. And yet last night, she could have sworn someone set a cup down the same way she had. That evening, Andrea prepared with a strange, quiet resolve. If the apartment below was truly vacant, then nothing she did should matter. She left her kettle cold. She set her slippers not by the bed, but neatly by the door, and instead of the novel she'd been halfway through, she opened a different book entirely, one she hadn't touched in months. For a while there was silence. No scrape, no echo, just the whisper of her own breathing. Andrea almost felt foolish. She sank into the armchair, opened her book, and let herself exhale. Then, a rustle, pages turning below. Andrea's fingers tightened around her book. Another sound followed, the faint pad of footsteps, moving toward where her slippers should have been. A pause. Then the soft, deliberate slide of fabric against the floorboards, like slippers being nudged into place. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She leaned forward, listening harder, until every muscle hummed with tension. And then, unmistakably, came the sound of a kettle lid rattling as water boiled, the one she had left cold. Andrea pressed her palm flat against her knee, the corner of her mouth twitching into something close to a smile. Andrea didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake, the glow of her lamp washing the room in a soft amber haze, listening for every creak, every whisper. The sounds came in fits, faint movements below her bed, the subtle scrape of a chair leg against the floor, a page turning when hers remained still. Hours stretched. At one point, Andrea shifted onto her side and tucked the blanket closer. A beat later, she swore she heard the faint rustle of fabric below, as though someone else mirrored her every move in perfect time. She should have been afraid. She should have been horrified, but instead, a peculiar calm spread through her chest. It felt like company, not threatening, not hostile, just present. By the time dawn lightened the edges of her curtains, Andrea had almost convinced herself that she wasn't imagining it, that someone down there, someone unseen, was living alongside her, step for step, breath for breath. And oddly enough, it made her feel less alone than she had in years. The following night was quieter than usual. Too quiet. Andrea sat in her chair with the lamp low, hands folded in her lap, waiting. For a long while, nothing stirred. No scrape, no echo, only silence. Then, 3 knocks, solid, deliberate, directly beneath her feet. Andrea's breath caught. The sound wasn't random. It wasn't the pipes or the building sighing. It was an answer. Her lamp flickered once, the shadows on the walls stretching long and strange. For a fleeting moment she saw movement in them, an outline pacing in slow circles around her chair, though no one stood in the room. The hair along her arms lifted. Andrea didn't move, didn't scream. She only sat very still, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Andrea sat in the wavering glow of her lamp, heart pounding, ears alive with the memory of those 3 knocks. She looked at the floorboards beneath her slippers, then at the thin walls breathing shadows around her. Slowly, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling a long, steady breath. The outline in the shifting light moved again, pacing, circling, as if restless, not menacing, not pressing, simply there. Andrea tilted her head toward it, her lips parting in a whisper meant only for herself. "I hear you." Silence answered, but the pacing slowed, like a heartbeat easing. A curious warmth bloomed in her chest, the kind that no neighbor's opinion, no passing glance in the mailroom had ever given her. For once, she didn't feel like the overlooked woman tucked away in a crumbling apartment. She wasn't alone. She stayed like that for a long while, letting the lamp flicker, letting the shadow's presence curl into the edges of her solitude until it felt less like intrusion and more like company. Morning came with a muted gray light, spilling over Andrea's curtains. She sat at her small kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't remember steeping. Downstairs, silence stretched, yet Andrea didn't feel the familiar tug of emptiness. Not anymore. The neighbors could whisper. They could call her the strange woman upstairs, the lonely hag in a vacant building. Let them. Because Andrea knew better. Each night, in the quiet between walls, someone moved when she moved, sat when she sat, breathed when she breathed. Someone loved her enough to trace her every step, to echo her every pause, to never let her sit in silence alone. She lifted her cup in a small, private toast. "To us," she murmured. And from somewhere deep below, the faint scrape of a chair answered her. Andrea smiled. For the first time in years, she felt seen.
You have reached then end of another Midnight Tales titled Vacant Apartment. Don't forget to share this with someone if you enjoyed it, and tap the notification bell for the arrival of new tales. See you next time.